Hey everybody, welcome back to an all-new episode of 10 to Life with me, Annie Elise. I hope you guys are having a good day so far. I apologize, I'm still getting over something here. My voice is still raspy, sick, disgusting. Hopefully I won't have to do a lot of cutting in this when I'm coughing and hacking up my life, but fingers crossed. Now, today's case, how do I want to start this? It is about luck, about having too much luck to where then something bad happens, like karma. And I say too much luck, meaning how anybody who's ever won the lottery, it's there's all of these superstitions and honestly some proof and evidence too, where it's anybody who wins the lottery either ends up dead in some sort of natural disaster, all of this string of bad luck after being so lucky. That's kind of what today's case is about. The person we're talking about too has a very fascinating name. It's Abraham Shakespeare, which I think is such a big, powerful name. So anyways, this intro is long-winded. I'm going to attribute that to me being sick. I apologize, but guys, let's jump right into it. Hey everyone, so I know it's only September, but holiday season, it is quickly approaching. And for me, that makes me think back to one of my most favorite childhood memories, which was playing bingo with my family during Christmas. Specifically with my dad, my siblings, we'd all be up at our cabin in Big Bear around this big round table. We'd be playing. It was always so much fun. Competitive, but fun. And now I'm so excited because I get to relive all of that excitement with Bingo Showdown, live and right from my phone. Now this game brings the thrill of live bingo and competitive tournament play with 24/7 bingo tournaments against 70,000 different real players and live. It's a free to play and super fun game. Now, I like to consider myself a good player, but let's see if you're good enough to beat 99% of the participants and qualify for the diamond tier. Now, Bingo Showdown is free to play, and it is super energetic, high energy, super fun. I also love that it kind of gives me Yellowstone vibes and takes me back to this Wild West bingo experience. I'm into it. Now get this too. New players get 3,000 tickets and 10 of every power-up to jumpstart your bingo playing. Tickets let you buy into rounds and play multiple cards, while the power-ups add extra excitement with 7 different types to boost your chances and double your points. So click on the link in the description or scan the QR code to download Bingo Showdown and start your Wild West bingo journey today. Head to the link in my description, join in on the fun now, and have an absolute blast playing Bingo Showdown. Trust me, it is so fun, it's competitive, and honestly, it is just my new favorite thing to play in my spare time, so you definitely need to check it out. The year was 2006, and Abraham Shakespeare was 41 years old. Now, he definitely had a lofty name, but his life didn't really match up. Now, growing up, Abraham's family was never wealthy, not by any means. They lived in Lake Wales, Florida, which is about an hour east of Tampa, and Lake Wales is pretty quiet. It's like a chill town, which for some people might be amazing, but for others, it is a bit stifling. It's not like there were tons of different jobs in the area either. Abraham's father ended up working as a citrus picker, and he didn't make enough money to support the family, no matter how far they tried to stretch the paycheck. Obviously, it's incredibly difficult to try to get out of any sort of poverty level as it is. It's not impossible, but it's just more difficult to succeed when you grow up that poor and struggling that much. People don't necessarily have the same opportunities, and the cycle continues. And sadly, this was no different for Abraham. I don't know the exact details of his education as far as what grade he got to or if he ever graduated high school, but I do know that he could barely read and write by the time that he left the classroom for the last time. Throughout his teenage years, he also was always getting into all sorts of trouble, and he spent multiple different times and stints in different homes for juvenile delinquents, things of that nature. So I think it is safe to say school wasn't necessarily a top priority in his life. He also had no professional qualifications, on top of barely being able to read and write. Plus, his criminal history made things pretty difficult career-wise. It was hard for Abraham to get a job. He didn't have a license, he didn't have a car, and just like his father so many years prior, he didn't really have a whole lot of options. And instead of focusing on bettering himself, Abraham just couldn't stay out of trouble. He was pretty much in trouble with the law constantly, and for a wide variety of reasons. Many of his run-ins with the police had to do with loitering. Other reasons ranged from driving without a license to stealing, assault, kind of across the gamut, you name it. 2 separate times, he even went to prison. Then, after getting out in 1995, he went and lived with his mom, Elizabeth Walker. However, his mom wasn't going to just let him sleep on the couch rent-free and kind of skirt by, so she encouraged him to go out and get a job. Not only because she wanted him to learn how to be responsible, but also because they needed the extra money to keep the lights on and put food on the table. Times are tough. So if Abraham thought that finding a decent job was hard before, it was now going to be even more difficult because he had more of a serious criminal record. He ended up working in places that most people, I think, would consider to be not ideal and maybe even pretty crappy, not at the top of their list, because most of his gigs involved a lot of physical labor. He was also a garbage man. He unloaded trucks. He washed dishes. Again, nothing super ideal for some, but it was going to bring him in money. And that was what he needed. He needed money. Every day was basically the same for him. It was get up, work his butt off until the sun goes down, go to bed, get up, do the same thing all over again the next morning, rinse, recycle, repeat, or whatever that saying is. What is it? Not rinse, recycle. Wash, rinse, repeat? I don't know. You get what I'm saying. It was a cycle, continuous. And that really was his reality until November 15th, 2006. Abraham was now 41 years old, and his entire life was literally changed in an instant. Because on this day in particular, Abraham was scheduled to ride shotgun with a truck driver named Michael Ford. They were supposed to make an overnight drive to Miami, making multiple stops and delivering things along the way. Now, sometime during the night, the pair arrived in a place called Frostproof. Michael had made the decision to drop into the Town Star Mini Mart and grab a couple of things for the road, specifically drinks and some cigarettes. So the pair of them pulled up and Michael got out of the car, asking Abraham if he wanted a drink from inside. Now, for some reason, Abraham did decide that instead of getting a drink with the last $5 that he had left, he wanted to try his luck and get a lottery ticket. So he told Michael to grab him 2 of the $2 tickets. He scratched the tickets, hoping maybe it would lead to something, and he, did that as soon as he got them, hoping he would maybe at least break even, maybe make back what he spent on them. But Abraham was absolutely stunned by what he saw when he scratched that ticket. He had hit the jackpot. I'm not talking a free ticket jackpot, a $10,000 jackpot, a $20,000 jackpot. We are talking a $30 million jackpot. Going from literally living paycheck to paycheck, never having more than just the bare minimum growing up, to suddenly being a multi-millionaire. It was unfathomable. Now, even though it was a $30 million jackpot, we know taxes are going to take a hefty chunk out of those winnings, right? But once all of that was said and done, Abraham still collected $12.7 million, which is an insane amount of money, especially for somebody who had never seen anything close to that amount of cash before. And I don't know about you guys, but it's pretty common for me and my friends to sit around daydreaming, what if I won the lottery? I'd buy this, I'd buy that, I'd quit my job, buy a home for all my family, things like that. Some people say they wouldn't tell a single soul and they would just dip out and bail with the money. But some people talk about how they'd pay off their debts, go back to school, buy a house, buy a car, all of the things. It's fun to imagine. It's fun to envision what you would do with all of that money. And if I won the lottery, what would I do? I feel like what would I do? I know what I would do in my mind, but I'm trying to figure out how to communicate it as far as execution wise. I would want to buy up all the different orphanages, foster homes, group homes, and then pay good families to put them all in homes or do something like that. Or maybe donate it all to an organization for trafficking. I don't know. I would want something with children to get all of them out of these group homes and out of these horrible foster homes into actual loving homes. And I don't know how I would do that with the money. If you have any ideas, in case I ever hit the lottery, let me know. But that's what I would do. Now, sorry, let me get back to the case. I know I kind of went off the rails there. So like a lot of people, Abraham wasn't necessarily the smartest with his money. In fact, he actually had a son, which he was super far behind on child support with. So right away, just like that, $9,000 was knocked off his total, which $9,000 is nothing in the grand scheme of almost $13 million. But the point is, the money, it started going away pretty quickly. Plus, everyone in town knew that Abraham had won, and people were flocking to him like vultures. Whether it was friends from decades ago coming out of the woodwork or family members now just like kissing his ass, there were people from all over begging for a cut of his winnings. And it's not like he told them no. I mean, Abraham was throwing people money left and right. He even gave his stepfather $1 million. He had 3 stepsisters. He gave each of them $250,000 apiece. He also paid off a friend's mortgage, which was about $200,000. He gave his mom $12,000, his sister $10,000, just farming out this money left and right to everybody. Now, I don't really know the inner workings of the family as far as who all he was or wasn't close to, but I do think it's pretty interesting that all of the step family members got a ton of money, while his mom and sister got only a few $1,000s. And if you think I'm done going down that list, there's a lot more. He also bought a house for $125,000 after only seeing it one time, which he didn't even end up living in it. He ended up deciding to rent it out to a tenant who he had only met once and didn't even really know. He gave his brother's son's best friend $40,000 just because. He paid off another guy's $60,000 mortgage, and they weren't even really good friends. Heck, he didn't even know the guy's last name. And then after that, he paid off another person's mortgage, which was $53,000. Now, when his family was kind of like, who is this guy even? Who do you keep paying and giving money to and paying all these mortgages for? Like, what's going on? He pretty much just said it was somebody who he had been knowing for a few years. Now, I'm not even going to try to do all of that math, guys, but it's pretty clear that he had been giving cash away like it was nothing. And he barely even spent anything on himself yet. The only relatively responsible thing that Abraham ever even ended up doing with all of his money was setting up a $1 million trust for his son for when he turned 18. Now, as much as it seems like he was just helping out his family and his friends, he was also blowing the money on random things in the community as well. People he didn't even know begged him to pay for some of their loved ones' funerals. Some people straight up just asked him to write them checks. And from my understanding, he usually just went forward with these requests and considered a lot of them to almost be like a loan, although nothing was ever in writing or anything like that. It was all just kind of done by word of mouth and trust alone that, eventually one day he'd get paid back sometime. I don't know, maybe. Now, in the middle of all of these handouts, he also bought himself another house, and this one was definitely much more luxurious than the first one he bought. It was bougie. It was a little over 5,300 square feet. It had 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, a 4-car garage. It was a brand new build, and it cost him a little over $1 million. This was in January of 2007. Now, 3 months after buying this $1 million home, Abraham actually got sued. And in a shocker, which not really, I'm being kind of sarcastic, the lawsuit was filed by somebody who just wanted a piece of his money. Like I said, the vultures were definitely out to play. Now, the man suing Abraham was actually Michael, that coworker who was with him the day that he won the lottery. Michael claimed that Abraham had stolen the winning lottery ticket out of his wallet and that the money rightfully belonged to him. Now, before he got around to filing the suit, Michael had apparently gone to Abraham personally, requesting no less than $1 million. He told Abraham that he felt that he was the one who went inside and bought the tickets for Abraham, so even though it was Abraham's idea to buy them and his money, he was entitled to a portion of it. Which Abraham basically kind of just told him like, no, screw off. Which I do think is interesting because Abraham was being so overly generous with his money to everybody else. And I wonder maybe if things would have been different if instead of like coming in hot, pretending he was entitled to the cash, Michael just asked for a handout outright. Maybe Abraham would have written him a check if he had just, shown some humility or not trying to like sue him and then blackmail him almost like, or give him an ultimatum of sorts. But instead, Abraham refused to give Michael anything. So Michael sued, and they both ended up going to court. At a deposition before the trial, Abraham made it very clear that he had never stolen anything from Michael, and especially had not stolen that lottery ticket. He also said that the reason that he gave so much money away was because, quote, the Bible says it's better to give than to receive. From there, the whole trial was pretty wild. Michael's attorneys came for Abraham pretty hard, claiming that he was an extremely angry man, that everything he was doing with his money always came with some sort of strings attached to it. That's their word and description, not mine. And I mean, that could be completely true, but it doesn't really have much to do whether or not Michael should receive a cut of the money or not. They also said that the ticket originally was Michael's, and Abraham had stolen it from his wallet. Now, Abraham must have been feeling pretty petty at the trial, because when he walked in one day, he came in carrying a big garbage bag over his shoulder, and it was full of lottery tickets that he had bought over the years, pretty much saying like, hey, this is proof enough that I buy lottery tickets pretty frequently. This ticket wasn't Michael's. I did this all the time. This was my luck. Abraham's lawyers also said that he had been spending a lot of money and didn't have much to even give Michael, even if Michael won the lawsuit. They didn't share hard numbers or anything like that, but it was clear that things weren't exactly looking good for Michael. Now, the whole thing wasn't really a complicated or in-depth trial by any means, but ultimately the jury fully sided with Abraham, and that was that. And I only mention all of this because I think that it really does go to show that a lot of people who win the lottery can sometimes make enemies of people who just want a slice of the money, a slice of the pie, and that happens pretty quickly. And it was no different for Abraham. Sure, he was doing a lot of really nice things for a lot of people who he really didn't owe anything to, but as we know, you can't please everyone. So as the months started passing, Abraham was very quickly starting to learn that money cannot buy you happiness. He had lived both lives at that point too. The one where you never know where your next meal is coming from, penny pinching to get by and struggling, now to a life of literal luxury. And even though he didn't have to struggle like he once had to, things definitely weren't just, peaches and rainbows all around. He started confiding about his troubles to his family and friends as well. He even told a childhood friend that he thought that so many different people were his friends, but that he quickly learned that people only wanted him for his money.
I really would like my old life back where I could walk the streets like a normal person.
It was a really tough pill to swallow for Abraham, that people were essentially just using him for his money. It made him question everybody's intentions. And I'm sure it probably also messed with his self-worth a little bit, maybe even a lot. Constantly just having to wonder if anyone would still like him if he had no money. Do they really like me? Are they just after my wallet? And there came a point where he worried that he would never find somebody who just cared about him for just simply being Abraham, not Abraham the lottery winner. That is until he met a woman named DeeDee Moore. Now, DeeDee and Abraham were introduced by a mutual friend in October of 2008, and the two of them immediately clicked. Not in a sexual or potential partner kind of way, but as friends, which was really exactly what Abraham needed, a real, genuine friend. Meeting somebody who seemed sincere and caring was just a huge shock for him. It was a pleasant surprise and everything. As the two of them got closer, DeeDee also came up with the idea of writing a book and telling Abraham's life story. She knew that he could hardly read or write, but she wanted to help him do this, kind of acting like a ghostwriter for him or something like that. Like, let's get your story out. Let's tell your story. It's important for people to hear, and I'll help you do that. So imagine going from feeling like nobody cares about any of the details of your life to now having somebody pretty much beg to write your life story about you. I think that would be flattering for anybody, and Abraham was really stoked by this. So the two of them started talking and gathering their thoughts. However, pretty early on in the process, DeeDee learned that Abraham was quickly running out of money. Specifically, that he only had about $1.5 million in cash left and about $3 million in assets. Now, I know hearing these numbers at first, it's kind of like, wow, you only have $1 million in cash? Poor you. But considering that he had started with almost $13 million not even 2 years before, that was pretty bad. At this rate, Abraham would be down to nothing in a matter of months. So DeeDee, being the very concerned friend, she came up with another plan. She was going to become his financial advisor. She wanted to help him. He needed somebody to help invest his money, keep track of what was going in and out, that sort of thing. Which, how perfect was this for him? He finally had a genuine friend who was going to make sure that nobody was going to take advantage of Abraham. I mean, not on her watch. So right away, they got to it. Abraham had worked with some advisors in the past, but none of them really stuck. He had been following one person's advice, but then dropping them, then going to somebody else, and so on. So he had a lot of these different accounts open at various banks. And DeeDee combed through all of it. She worked really hard to do so. She wanted to make sense of what money was where, what's available, what can we do to get you in a better financial position. And after figuring it all out, DeeDee took complete control over Abraham's assets. After looking at how much cash he had, what valuables he owned, and what debt he had to pay off, who owed him money, everything else that was really involved in the checks and balances of everything, she worked out that he had about $3.5 million to his name left. Then she started making moves with the money. Abraham had bought an annuities account, which is basically like a retirement savings, something you buy when you're young and then you don't touch it and it grows over time and then becomes more valuable. And in December of 2008, instead of letting it sit and grow a little bit more, Abraham sold it for $250,000. Now, I'm not a financial expert, so I don't fully understand whether that was a good move or not in Abraham's circumstances. Maybe the move was to get more liquid to put it somewhere else where it could grow quicker and you can have access to it. But at least he was making money rather than spending it like he had been doing. Things were actually favoring up for him. Now, this money didn't just go into Abraham's personal checking account or anything like that where he could risk spending it or giving it to somebody else. DeeDee told Abraham that she was going to transfer the money to her business account. She had owned this account since 2004, and her reasoning behind that was that if she had a certain amount of money all in one place, she would be able to pay Abraham's taxes with it, making sure that he didn't end up with any IRS issues, anything like that. So now 2009 was a pretty busy year for DeeDee and Abraham. The two of them did a lot of different things together with Abraham's assets and his money, trying to get things, squared away. There's a lot of really complicated financial terms and it can get a bit confusing. So instead of going into detail about every little thing, I'm just going to kind of summarize the gist of all of it here. Beginning on January 9th, a deed was signed for Abraham's residence to American Medical Professionals, LLC, which is DeeDee's business account. Over a few days then in mid-January, Abraham signed paperwork that said American Medical Professionals, LLC now owned all 5 of his mortgages. Then on the 15th, Abraham signed an agreement which basically sold all of his unenumerated assets to American Medical Professionals, LLC for about $185,000. Then, just a few weeks later, on February 5th, a request form was faxed from a Staples that was located in Lakeland, Florida, signed by Abraham, and the form requested for surrender of the money in one of the accounts that was in the name of Abraham Shakespeare. This was for the amount of a little over $1 million. And the check was to be sent to Abraham's home and made payable to him. A few days after that, on February 9th, DeeDee registered a business in Abraham's name. It was titled Abraham Shakespeare, LLC. The following day, she opened up a bank account at Bank of America for that LLC with about $100. Now, this was a good move because he was finally getting his own LLC set up, his own banking account, getting things in place where he could start doing all of the tax stuff that DeeDee had been doing for him. Things were going by the book. She was helping him get set up. However, a big thing about this account was that DeeDee was the only signer on it. Not even Abraham was added to it. Now, the $1 million that I mentioned earlier was put into Abraham's new account, the one that DeeDee had made, which again might sound good, but remember, DeeDee was the only one who could access this account. So this was something that Abraham, of course, questioned at first. And apparently he and DeeDee sat down and had a business meeting regarding whether or not Abraham could be put on the account, if it was a good idea. If he was listed as a signer on the account, that meant that he could just go to the bank and withdraw money, however much money, whenever he wanted it. And DeeDee decided during this meeting not to have Abraham's name on the account as a signer for whatever reason. Possibly because he had been so, frivolous with his money before that it wasn't responsible, things like that. Kind of like, let me hold you back so that you don't get yourself in trouble. So basically now, if Abraham wanted to spend, a single cent of money from that account, he would have to ask DeeDee to withdraw it for him. He literally couldn't access his own money on his own. And for whatever reason, I guess that wasn't a huge red flag to him. He had appointed DeeDee as his financial advisor, and it seemed like this was all just part of it and that it was a good move, a strategic move. But in actuality, even though it was Abraham's money, it really was more like DeeDee's money at this point. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, the point of a financial advisor is to make sure that you don't go and blow that money. So it was a good thing that DeeDee had some checks and balances in place to stop Abraham from wasting the cash that he had been doing for the previous 2 years. But then things started happening behind the scenes that seemed kind of odd, even for a financial advisor. Now remember, the business account in Abraham's name had a ton of money in it, and only one person who could access it or move it was DeeDee. Well, over the course of 3 days in February, namely the 18th, 19th, and 23rd, somebody messed with the money. On the 18th, somebody wrote a cashier's check for $250,000. They made it payable to a company called ASTAT and Supply, LLC. And this company had nothing to do with Abraham, absolutely nothing. He didn't own it, he didn't owe them money, zip, zilch, nada. Then on the 19th and the 23rd, 2 more cashier checks totaling to $200,000 and $250,000 came out of Abraham's account. This time, though, they were made out to none other than American Medical Professionals, LLC, which, remember, is DeeDee's business account. So by the end of February, Abraham's account only had a balance of $44,000 in it. But since he didn't have access to it and was fully trusting DeeDee to handle all of his affairs, he genuinely was oblivious to pretty much everything that was happening. And as I'm sure you can guess by now, it turns out that DeeDee wasn't somebody who just cared about Abraham as a person. She wasn't making sure that he didn't get scammed. She was just another person who was out for his money and did a really great job pretending to be his friend and getting him to trust her. And so far, things were working out in her favor pretty easily. For his part, Abraham fully trusted DeeDee, not just with his finances, but DeeDee was giving him plenty of personal advice too. When Abraham said that he felt like he was essentially surrounded by human vultures 24/7, all out for his money, DeeDee told him just he needed to avoid being in those situations. He should just stay inside his house, almost being like a recluse. I don't know if Abraham was just really worn down, or maybe he was just really trusting anything and everything that came out of DeeDee's mouth, but he heard that and he was like, that's a good idea. So Abraham started essentially hiding out in his own house. He hardly ever saw or talked to other people. It was just easier this way. If he pretty much never interacted with anyone, then they couldn't ask him for money, right? So slowly, Abraham went days, then weeks, then months going by without contacting or seeing anyone in his family. Different relatives separately tried reaching out to him, but nothing. And it wasn't like he was just ignoring distant second cousins or anything like that. He was even ignoring his 8-year-old son, Moses. He also was ignoring Moses' mom, Elizabeth. Both of them were really close to Abraham, and it was odd that he had pretty much just blown them off completely, like it was nothing. Had the money gotten to his head? Was he living in this fantasy world? Something like that? Because literally the only person that any of them could ever get a hold of when they tried to reach Abraham was DeeDee. Every time they asked for Abraham or asked to see him or how he was doing, DeeDee always just had these very harsh answers. She would either straight up tell each of them that Abraham didn't want to see them or didn't want to talk to them because they were just money hungry. She also would tell them that because of all of this stress that they had caused him, he needed to get away and be by himself for a while, just putting the blame on everybody else. DeeDee said that Abraham would get in touch with her every once in a while and now and then just to check in and let her know that he was fine. But other than that, he just apparently wanted to be left alone completely by everyone. Not just them, but her as well. Now, for a while, this whole story made sense. As much as it hurts his family to hear that he essentially wanted nothing to do with them, they kind of understood. He had mentioned so many times that he wished he never even won the lottery and that his life had changed for the worse. Heck, he even told his cousin Cedric, who he was very close with, that he wanted to leave town. So maybe the pressure really had just been too much, and he finally decided to get away from it all. Now, the good news was that he wasn't completely no contact, because after a few months, he did start sending his mother a few quick messages, just checking in here and there. Still, though, it wasn't like Abraham. I mean, he used to be very close with his family, close enough that he would literally give them thousands upon thousands of dollars just for the sake of helping them out. But now, he wasn't even talking to them very often. So needless to say, Abraham's mom was not comforted by these text messages from him. And as time went on, she began to get more and more suspicious of them. He refused to ever call. It was strictly texting. But remember, Abraham could barely read or write. Now, I guess there's a chance that maybe he spent some of his lotto winnings going back to school, something like that. And not only did he learn to read and write, but he was now comfortable with it, and so comfortable that he preferred texting to talking out loud. It sure doesn't sound likely to me, though, but hey, stranger things have happened. But his family also got weirded out by the fact that DeeDee was the only one that he ever talked to. Like, who was this woman? It was just so weird that he had trusted someone that he had only met a few months ago and trusted her with information like where he was, everyday updates, things like that, but he wouldn't even trust his own mother or even his son's mother to share those things. So things just weren't adding up. And after 7 long months of this like back and forth game, Abraham's family finally said enough is enough. His family went to the authorities and they reported him missing. They had not physically seen him in person since April. So we're talking 6 months had gone by. I think they hoped that in the best case scenario, maybe the police would look into it for a few days, come back and say, hey, Abraham is fine. He's sipping margaritas, maybe on a beach somewhere. He just doesn't want to talk to you guys, doesn't want to see you guys. I did a wellness check. It's all good. Worst case scenario though, who even knows? When it's public knowledge that somebody is that wealthy, and even though Abraham was now basically broke, which nobody really knew that, people with bad intentions could go after him. So that idea, mixed with their overall uneasy feeling about everything, it just made the family think that maybe the disappearance and him, going off the grid, off the radar, wasn't just as simple and as casual as DeeDee was leading them to believe. Now, interestingly enough, it was Abraham's cousin Cedric who originally reported him as a missing person. He told the police that he felt like DeeDee was somehow involved, but he later told them that he didn't want to be involved in any part of the missing persons investigation for whatever reason. The first thing that the investigators really noticed and really needed to figure out was if people had seen or heard from Abraham, to see if this was maybe just some sort of family dispute, some sort of family drama. Let's figure out what's going on. So that's why a few days later, after a missing persons report was filed on Abraham, the investigators found themselves at the law office of a man named D. Howard Stitzel. Abraham was Howard's client, and apparently Howard was the attorney who was involved in Abraham signing over his mortgages to DeeDee's business account for, American Medical Professionals, LLC. The police figured maybe even if Abraham was ignoring everybody else, surely he would still be in contact with his lawyer. Well, Howard told the police that he had spoken on the phone with Abraham on October 6th, so around 1 month before he was reported as missing. Howard told the investigators that while he couldn't tell them what exactly they talked about, all he could really tell them was that he, was confirming he did in fact talk to him on the phone. But the interesting thing was, Howard hadn't talked to Abraham on his office or personal phone. He had talked to him through DeeDee's phone. So there was like this odd element to it again, where the only way to reach Abraham was through DeeDee. So the police asked Howard if he was really sure that he did talk to Abraham and maybe not somebody else who was pretending to be him. And his response? Abraham was his client, so he knew his voice well. Which that wasn't really a good enough answer for the detectives, and Abraham's cousin had told the investigators that he felt like DeeDee was somehow involved in all of this. So sure enough, they really started honing in on her. When DeeDee was first interviewed by the investigators, she told them pretty much the same things that she had told Abraham's family. He was fine. He didn't want to be seen. He didn't want to talk to anybody other than her, and that was that. So the police were obviously like, okay, great. Well, if he's fine, tell him to give us a call confirming that for himself. Then we'll put all of this behind us. It'll be fine. He's an adult. If he wants to run away and not talk to his family, he has every right to do so. But we need him to confirm that he's actually alive and well. So DeeDee pretty much assured them that they'd be hearing from Abraham within the next few days. From there, all they could really do was wait. Now, DeeDee kept herself pretty busy during those few days because instead of keeping in touch with the investigators, she went straight to the media because by now the public had heard about Abraham being a missing person. In fact, DeeDee was a part of a 3-hour-long interview with a reporter from the local Lakeland newspaper. During the interview, she fully cleared the air on any rumors about anything possibly being negative that could have happened to Abraham, since by that point there was plenty of gossip going around that maybe somebody had done something horrible to him. Even though DeeDee had always said that Abraham left willingly on his own, to get away from everyone, she also said that just days before he left town, he went around introducing her to all of the people who owed him money, and basically letting them know that DeeDee was now in charge of things and that she was going to be coming in and collecting for his debts. So according to her, he still left willingly, but she definitely had set the scene for it to seem like he had a lot of enemies maybe who might want to hurt him because they didn't want to owe him money and pay him back, and they'd rather hurt him instead. Another really interesting thing that DeeDee said during this interview was that she had a videotaped recording of Abraham from April 9th. In it, he said that he was tired of everyone asking for money, and he was going to leave Lakeland behind. I guess he recorded it just in case anything like this ever came up in the future.
You get tired of people asking you for money all the time, Abe?
They don't take no for an ounce or so. And just let them keep on asking.
Mm-hmm. So where do you want to go to?
It don't matter to me. I'm not a picky person.
California. You want a foreign country? Are you gonna miss your home?
Yep, I miss it, but life goes on.
So the reporter who interviewed DeeDee felt like there was just still something fishy going on here. So she took the entire 3-hour-long tape to the police, and they listened to the entire thing. And this is where things really start to get interesting. The investigators figured that since DeeDee was essentially the only one that Abraham seemed to still be in contact with, it would be worthwhile to get a warrant to search her phone. That way they could see how often they truly did spoke, also what they talked about, that sort of thing. Well, when they looked through DeeDee's call logs, specifically the calls between her and Abraham, the detectives saw that every single call between DeeDee and Abraham after April 9th had all been coming from the exact same location, as in both DeeDee and Abraham's phones were in the exact same location. Sure, there's the possibility that maybe Abraham had been hiding away from his family in plain sight this whole time. Maybe he and DeeDee planned this whole thing to make sure that his family really thought that he had skipped town, all while he was actually staying with her. I guess it is possible, but it also just doesn't make sense why they wouldn't tell the investigators the truth, so they could at least go back to laying low and not having people questioning them and all up in their business 24/7. Again, if Abraham really didn't want to be involved in his family's lives, that wasn't a crime. All he had to do was say so to the investigators. Because if that's not the case, it was looking more and more like DeeDee had been faking those calls between her and Abraham this entire time.
If Abraham's alive and well someplace and sees this broadcast, simply let us know that you're alive and well and confirm that. We won't tell anyone where you are if you want to remain anonymous. We just want to close our investigation and go on to something else.
So the police went back to DeeDee to question her about this discovery that they made. First, they just asked her if she had Abraham's phone, to which she answered no. So then they told her that they had the data to prove that the calls were coming from the same places. And that's when she changed her story. Now she told the investigators that she actually did have Abraham's phone and had it the entire time. Apparently, he told her to keep it so that she could contact his friends and family whenever he wanted her to update them, because remember, he couldn't text on his own without help. She claimed that this was all part of what he wanted, and it was all part of the plan. But according to her, Abraham was annoyed at how much of a fuss his family had been making with the missing persons report. And because of this, he apparently told her, chuck the phone out of your car window at a random spot because I don't want to be found. Sure. Now, I think this goes without saying. But DeeDee was obviously lying at this point. I don't care how much your so-called friend doesn't want to be found. You don't ever lie to the police. Not to mention the whole story just sounded so made up, so on the spot, probably because it was made up on the spot. Now, the problem was that the detectives really didn't have anything on DeeDee, though, to prove that she had done something to Abraham. They were going to need a little bit more if they were going to actually try to build a case against her. Now, the police weren't the only ones who thought that DeeDee was super suspicious. Like I mentioned earlier, the media was absolutely having a field day with this case. Everyone thought that there was foul play involved, and after DeeDee's interview, people felt even more strongly about her having something to do with Abraham's disappearance. It's funny, because there were two very different groups of people working to solve this case. The investigators, who were obviously trained professionals, and then a group of people in an online web sleuths form who just became absolutely dedicated to researching Abraham's case, literally day in and day out. I think a lot of the time when the internet gets heavily involved in true crime cases, the police can get, a little salty and pretty much will tell them to back off, but not in this case. Say what you want about these people, but they were immediately finding a lot of possible clues, specifically surrounding DeeDee. Little by little, the sleuthers began posting things that they found out about DeeDee, and it was pretty shocking. They, not the police, but the online crime solvers, were the ones who found out about DeeDee's business account, American Medical Professionals, and how literally every single mortgage that Abraham had was handed over to DeeDee like it was nothing. Then there was the fact that DeeDee was posting pictures from inside Abraham's house, living in it like it was rightfully hers, which I guess it was kind of legally, but still, you know what I mean? It's kind of weird. Now, in typical DeeDee fashion, she somehow learned about this online form, and she was pissed. She could not stand any sort of bad media attention, which that's why she did that 3-hour-long interview with the reporter, because she was trying to clear her name. So DeeDee joined this online forum. Over and over again, she proclaimed her innocence and repeated that she was still in contact with Abraham. But at this point, nobody was buying it. But again, the investigators still faced the problem of not really having enough to build a solid case against her. Not even after all of the web sleuths started pulling all of the financial and property records. Yeah, it made things look suspicious and proved that DeeDee was more than likely taking advantage of Abraham this entire time, but it didn't exactly prove that she had broken any laws. Interestingly enough, it ended up being DeeDee's own pride, though, that got her caught. It was around Christmas time, and even though Abraham's mom had heard every terrible rumor and knew the possibilities of what was going on, she still held on to the hope that Abraham would contact her at Christmas, and that he would just put all of her fears to rest. She couldn't imagine that he would ever willingly ignore her on a holiday like that, something so major. And shockingly, Elizabeth did end up getting a call, but it wasn't like anything that she had hoped it would be. It came from a blocked number, and hoping and praying that it was going to be her son, she answered the call immediately. On the other end of the line was a man who was claiming to be Abraham. He kept the conversation pretty vague, mentioning he didn't feel well, but the whole thing just rubbed Elizabeth the wrong way. She felt in her heart of hearts that something very fishy was up with that call. The man just did not sound like her son. So she reported the call to the investigators, who immediately traced the call. It had come from a phone that was owned by a man named Greg Smith. Now, if you're wondering, okay, Annie, that name doesn't ring a bell, it's because we haven't mentioned him yet. And more importantly, he wasn't on the investigators' radar at all. Well, the police tracked down the phone location to a nearby mall, and immediately they sent some officers to go scope out the scene, see if they saw anything weird, and boy, did they ever. Sure enough, at the mall, they saw the man who they believed to be Greg Smith. And even more interesting was the fact that they caught the man with none other than DeeDee. And it did not take trained professionals to see that DeeDee was physically handing him a wad of cash. So they grabbed this guy, grabbed him really quickly, and immediately began interrogating him. Greg clearly had no loyalty to DeeDee, and he definitely wasn't going to take the fall for anything, so he told the police every single detail of their plan. Now, remember earlier when I told you that DeeDee mentioned in her interview with that reporter how Abraham had pretty much given her this long list of people who owed him money, and he expected her to go and collect that money for him? Apparently, that was part true. DeeDee really did know every single person who owed Abraham money, but as it turns out, her focus wasn't entirely on getting the money back. See, Greg had taken out an $87,000 loan from Abraham. So DeeDee had met up with him originally to basically harass him until he started handing over the money. But according to Greg, she decided that they might be able to work something else out. A different deal could be struck here. Apparently, DeeDee told him that she would pay him $5,000 for one very simple task. All he had to do was make a phone call and pretend to be Abraham. Easy peasy, right? So obviously he agreed. I mean, that's a lot of money in exchange for not very much work, not only the $5,000, but maybe having all of his debt forgiven. So whenever the investigators told him that they thought that DeeDee had done something to Abraham, Greg panicked. He insisted that he had no idea that Abraham was even missing, and he definitely did not know anything about foul play. He was just doing what he was asked to do to make a quick buck, and he didn't ask any questions. Now, DeeDee was already a walking red flag to begin with. But the fact that she had staged a phone call, I would say that the police were shocked by what they found, but I genuinely don't think that they were. I think that they expected something like this. And as it turns out, DeeDee was no stranger to law enforcement. In 2001, she was charged with falsely reporting a crime after she claimed it to have been carjacked and sexually assaulted. The whole thing was just a big insurance fraud scheme to get a check for the stolen car. She literally even taped her own wrists and threw herself out of somebody else's car to make her injuries more believable. She even went to the hospital and she got a sexual assault kit, a SANE exam. Meanwhile, her car was just actually chilling in a friend's garage. I mean, warped reality, psychopath comes to mind. Because what kind of sick person makes up a assault like that for an insurance payout? The police also learned that she had, which, not shocker, absolutely no shocker, but no experience in anything related to finances or being a financial advisor. Which that new fun information made it pretty clear that from literally the moment that she met Abraham, she was preying on him. She never was his friend, never was trying to do right by him, get his finances in order and help him. She just saw an easy target. The investigators were smart, and they saw how cooperative Greg was during this interview and how much he was willing to give them this information all to stay out of trouble. It was clear that he didn't want anything to do with DeeDee now that he realized how serious these charges were against him. So because of that, the investigators came up with an idea, a plan. Greg was going to be right in the middle of this plan too. The plan was for Greg to meet up with DeeDee with a wire hidden in a soda can. And during this conversation, he was going to pretty much tell her that the cops had spoken to him and were on her tail, that she needed to watch out, she needed to be careful. He also was going to tell DeeDee that he had a cousin who was already going to jail for 20 years and that this cousin would be willing to confess to Abraham's murder in exchange for $50,000. The whole thing was all too easy. But Greg was also a pretty good actor. I'll give him that. I mean, he was smooth talking. He made her fully trust him. It was very convincing.
Well, they'll never know about you anyway. I'll never give you up. You know what I'm saying?
Ever.
Man, listen, I'm so deep in this with you right now. If you go down, I go down right now.
DeeDee obviously wanted to save her own skin. So she told Greg, yes, 100%, introduce me to your cousin. We'll get something started. We'll do all of this. It'll all go to plan. And so just set it up. Well, this cousin was an undercover police officer.
This situation has gotten big. I'm in over my head.
Oh, we can do this, but I'm gonna need a body.
Why would you do that, though, for me?
I'm going anyhow.
So
I'm going anyhow.
If you do this, you're gonna be a very popular person. You're gonna be a legend.
Once I go ahead and confess to this shit, they done with you. Because they definitely gonna want the body.
As soon as DeeDee met up with this guy, she just trauma dumped on him hard. She told him about the whole situation, how it had gotten way too big for her, how she felt like she was in over her head, and just confided in him about everything. Now, the undercover officer said that he would take the fall, but he needed two things: the location of the body and the murder weapon. He explained that the investigators weren't going to believe him if he couldn't provide those things, which isn't entirely untrue, because you would be shocked at how many crazies are out there who just confess to crimes that they didn't do just because they want notoriety. Now, DeeDee didn't show much skepticism during the entire exchange, and at one point she asked the guy why he would even do it for her. So the undercover officer says, I'm already going to prison, what's one more? I am happy to do it in exchange for the money. And that was a good enough answer for her. Which I can't help but wonder if DeeDee ever sat back and thought for even 1 second that the whole thing just seemed far too easy, too perfect. I mean, she must not have, because she showed no hesitation whatsoever. She was more than happy to just hand over a .38 caliber gun. She told this undercover cop that Abraham's body was already buried 6 feet under, buried under a concrete slab at a house that she had purchased. I mean, hook, line, and sinker, fell for it.
Okay. Deal. Like I said, I know there's a body. I'll fix everything where he's at and everything. And then, what do you want?
50 grand.
Okay.
Now, this all seems great, right? Because it seems like a confession. Wrong. And DeeDee still refused to tell this undercover cop that she had anything to do with Abraham's death. I mean, I don't know how dumb she thought everybody was, but she claimed that she had gotten the gun from an unknown person who had killed Abraham and who had buried him, and that it was on her property of all places, but that she had nothing to do with it, which, I mean, come on, DeeDee. I'm rolling my eyes so hard I can see my brain in the back of my head. She even told the undercover cop that the murder had taken place inside her office at her house. Like, what? but you didn't commit the murder? Like, okay. So on January 28th, 2010, the investigators went to that house and they started digging. Apparently, the statement that DeeDee gave to that undercover cop was the only time that DeeDee was ever being honest. Because sure enough, 6 feet deep, just like she had promised, there was Abraham's decomposing body with clear gunshot wounds.
And came into the newsroom within the last 2 hours. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office says the human remains found yesterday do belong to the missing lotto winner, Abraham Shakespeare. Big break in the case came earlier this week when a tipster told them to check out a home off East State Road 60 in Hillsborough County. When detectives arrived at that home, they started digging in nearby woods, and they finally zeroed in on a 30 by 30 foot concrete slab yesterday. Now, they brought in heavy digging equipment, and after ripping apart that slab, they found Shakespeare's remains. An autopsy earlier today helped investigators confirm their suspicions in this case.
The autopsy report confirmed that he had 2 gunshot wounds to the chest. After Abraham's body was found, the investigators then brought DeeDee back in and began questioning her. Even once she knew that Abraham's body had been found, though, she still refused to confess that she had anything to do with this murder. Instead, she told the investigators so many different versions of what happened. At first, she said that his death was a drug deal gone wrong. She claimed that she and Abraham had been at the house having a normal, casual night when a group of men stormed in and everything went to hell. She even went as far as saying that the intruders put the gun inside of her mouth and threatened her, and that she was so scared that she peed her pants. She admitted that the gun used in the murder was hers, but again, that she was not the one to pull the trigger. She claimed that the handgun was in an open gun safe and that when the intruders saw it, they grabbed it and then they shot Abraham. She also claimed that she couldn't remember this drug dealer's name. So the investigators were like, DeeDee, we know that you're lying, girl. Like, come on, the jig is up. So literally right there on the spot, she came up with a completely different story. This time she claimed that the cousin, Cedric, who had reported him missing, remember, had come inside the house and then shot him in cold blood right in front of her. Now at this point, the investigators were beyond fed up with her, and they started really applying the pressure. The investigators just straight up told her she already had 2 strikes, like basically saying like, look, you need to quit telling all these different versions, all these different lies, and just get to the truth. Her response? She watched Abraham's cousin Cedric shoot him, and she was in the room when it happened. So this obviously frustrated the investigators, and things started getting more heated. They started raising their voices and basically were telling her she needed to quit with this whole cover-up argument because the only person trying to cover up the crime was herself. Poor DeeDee, always the helpless victim who is being framed for something that she didn't do. Yeah, right. Now, you're never going to believe this, but DeeDee ended up changing her story a 3rd time. This time, she blamed her 14-year-old son for shooting Abraham and claimed she had to cover it up because she needed to protect him. Which, what kind of mother blames their child for a murder that they committed? Even the investigators were stunned that these words were seriously coming out of her mouth. It was bizarre. Towards the end of the interview, DeeDee straight up asked the detectives if she could still keep all of her things if she told them the truth of who really killed Abraham. And listening to her go back and forth and all around, it was giving the police literal whiplash. But then she really had the audacity to act upset when the investigators wouldn't believe her.
I honestly can't look at you and believe a word that's come out of your mouth. You have lied and lied and lied and lied.
In the interrogation, she gets so noticeably upset when the detectives are pretty much telling her, all you do is constantly lie. So yeah, we don't believe you. And her body language and the way that her voice gets all high-pitched, it just reminds me of a little kid who knows that they're in trouble for something, which they clearly did, but still won't fess up and tell the truth. It's honestly a little bit comical. Now, I genuinely don't understand how, but even after finding Abraham's body and connecting the murder weapon to DeeDee, apparently there still wasn't enough evidence to arrest her. Somehow, DeeDee was still a free woman, talking to the press, living her best life, spending Abraham's money. This woman seriously had such audacity to act like all of the suspicion and the murder investigation were a burden to her, as if she wasn't the cause for all of it.
Because the media will not leave, and this is an intrusion on all my neighbors, and they don't deserve any of this. I have never hurt that man. He knows everyone knows I would never hurt that man in any way.
Did you murder Abraham Shakespeare?
Absolutely not. And I would
DeeDee,
not do that.
you indicated you know who pulled the trigger.
I have given all the information to the sheriff's department. So,
What did they say? He was shot in the head?
One of your attorneys last night.
yeah. Do you want to shut the cameras off now? With the situation and how it went down, I wouldn't believe myself. I would say, lock her up. I would. But there's always two sides to every story. There's always more to any situation. God up above knows I didn't shoot that man, and that is the only person I have to answer to. They're saying that I took a gun, put it up, and killed another human being, and I would never, ever do that.
Finally, after many back and forth interviews with DeeDee, who was always pulling some new story out of nowhere, the detectives finally had enough to charge her with Abraham's murder. And in February of 2010, DeeDee was arrested.
Hey, DeeDee, they're calling you a murderer. Are you a murderer?
Now, one thing about DeeDee, this woman loved to talk, especially about herself. So she continued doing many media interviews, proclaiming her innocence, trying her hardest to convince everyone that not only did she not kill Abraham, but that the only reason she had all of his money was because he gave it to her as a gift.
I had money. I didn't need money like this. I had plenty of money. I had money.
So what's wrong with having a bit more money?
I'm not greedy like that, and I could make as much money as I wanted and Abraham was worth more to me alive than dead.
She even said in one interview from prison that the undercover cop had manipulated her. I genuinely think that she told her lies with so much conviction because she actually believed her own bullshit.
They set me up. If you listen to the tape, he manipulates me. People say no. Listen to the tape. You will see him manipulate me.
And get this, even after DeeDee was arrested, she still couldn't keep her story straight. She went from seeing the murder firsthand, whether it was committed by the random drug dealers, her son, or Abraham's cousin Cedric, to saying during a phone call that she never even saw the murder happen. She was only told about it.
You said a guy named Ronald was there, and another guy. Talk about that again. Talk about that night. You said you didn't do it. Go ahead. Tell me what the conversation. You said, let's just go back over that.
I told you I don't want to go over that part until I talk to.
But what about you said that?
Part
you said
I will
that.
tell you is there was two guys. A guy named Ronald, and he told me that the other guy killed him.
He said the other guy killed him?
Yeah, Ronald told me the
you
other
didn't
guy
see
killed
it?
him. I can't say all that.
Did you see what happened?
Trust me, they forced me to say that. I didn't see it happen, no.
Okay, you didn't see it happen. They forced you to say that.
Yeah.
Now, what about...
I didn't know I didn't know he was dead until January when everybody else did. When I found out, I was completely shocked. That's why I went to Greg. Yes, I lied to the cops. If I could have told them a pink elephant shot him with the trunk, I would have, because I was scared. These people were saying they were going to kill my son, and the cops didn't believe me. All I asked for the cops to do, for me to describe the guy I seen and talked to, all I asked them to do was to protect my son. I told everybody a different story because I couldn't tell which one was going back to Ronald and telling him everything I was saying to the cops. Because every time I turned around, he knew exactly what I told the cops. Exactly to the T what I told the cops. So I knew.
So you told the police all these different stories because you were afraid of Ronald?
Yeah. And I told them that. And when they brought me in for questioning, on my questioning tape, in questioning, I say the same thing. I tell them, you're blackmailing me. You're trying to get me to tell you something, and I want protection for my son. All they had to do was put my son in protection, and that's it. They would never do that. What does that hurt? How is that going to hurt anything? If they would have protected my son, and then I told them, and they found out it was a lie, then throw the book at me. Give me 45 years in prison. Make me an old lady. I don't care. But at least protect him.
So this guy she mentioned was somebody that she brought up during one of her interrogations. But the investigators looked into it and they found that he was just totally a made-up person. So again, She clearly just did not keep her story straight. It gives me a headache trying to wrap my head around all of the different stories and the lies that she told. On top of trying to convince the world of her innocence too, she was still doing her best to get somebody else to take the fall for the murder. Still. She literally called her dad and begged him to say that he was the killer. She didn't care who it was as long as it wasn't her. Which I gotta just say, girl, stay out of the kitchen if you can't take the heat. Like, the jig is up. This woman was truly something else. Now, one thing that really bothered people leading up to her trial, and even during it, was the constant, huge smile on her face. I can only imagine how frustrated and angry Abraham's family was seeing her laugh and smile like it was all some sort of joke. Her trial began in November of 2012, and DeeDee's defense team argued that there was no evidence to actually prove that she had been the one to pull the trigger and kill Abraham. They argued that what little evidence the prosecution did have was all consequential. The prosecution, however, argued that despite her web of lies, there was a clear trail showing that DeeDee had been taking advantage of Abraham, stealing his money, then killing him to just seal the deal. Now, it seems to me like DeeDee and her defense attorney must have just known that they were screwed or something, because time and time again, they continued to cause disruptions which created delays in the trial. And I can see DeeDee doing something like that, but for her attorney to do it as well, I mean, talk about unprofessional. And DeeDee ended up actually being dubbed the drama queen of the courtroom. We all know she couldn't control those facial expressions of hers, and her trial was also no different. Every time a witness testified, instead of just sitting there and behaving like any normal person would, DeeDee would show her shock and her anger and who even knows what else. She was just being so extra with all of it. Literally, it began to get so distracting that the judge had to tell her to tone it down. That's how bad it got. And this wasn't just a one and done thing. She got in trouble multiple times for acting the way that she was acting. During Abraham's ex-girlfriend's testimony, DeeDee even literally yelled that she was tired of everybody lying. It seems to me like she just couldn't handle the truth being told. And the way that her lawyer just sat there looking like he was questioning his every life choice, I mean, I feel like it needs to be some sort of meme. It was just crazy to me. And you would think that after being scolded like a child, that would be enough, but it wasn't. The trial had to be delayed again because DeeDee and her lawyer were talking way too loud and it was causing disruptions while the witnesses were testifying, which, who gave this guy a law degree? It is so unprofessional. Another delay came after DeeDee was apparently given medicine in jail to treat a kidney infection, and she had some sort of bad allergic reaction to it. So she had to go to the infirmary and be put on a 24-hour watch before being finally cleared. Then the interrogation tapes were played in court. And you would think that since she was told to control her facial expressions, literally only one day before, that she would do it. But the entire time the videos were played, she just looked over the top, shocked, confused, all the things. And then there was another weird delay in the trial when someone was actually escorted out of the courtroom. The judge said it was because the person, a friend of DeeDee's from prison apparently, took part in some conversations that could be construed as a threat towards one of the witnesses in the case. I can't insert the video clip here for copyright reasons, and it really isn't that relevant in the grand scheme of things, but if you have the time, you should look it up and watch it. All I'm going to say is it makes total sense why these two people would be friends. Birds of a feather, right? So now that we've gone over DeeDee's poor behavior in court, let's get to the actual, juicy details that some of the witnesses gave during their testimony. Possibly some of the most interesting testimony came from DeeDee's ex-boyfriend, a man named Shar. Shar was 11 years younger than DeeDee, only 23 years old when they were together. Shar was broke, out of work, and DeeDee was basically his sugar mama. She paid his rent, bought him food, gifts, whatever he wanted, she made it happen. I mean, you name it. And as you can probably guess, she was doing all of this with Abraham's money. But Shar had no idea. He was out of town the day that Abraham was killed, and he testified that he had met Abraham a few times, but when he went missing, DeeDee gave him the same story that she told everybody else. And being 23 years old and pretty naive, he just kind of took what she was saying as gospel. She even bought him a $70,000 Corvette with Abraham's money, and he had no idea. He thought that he had struck gold as far as picking the right woman, a sugar mama. Not too long after DeeDee told him that Abraham had skipped town, she also told him that she owned all of Abraham's assets, including his house, things like that, and they moved into this house together as a couple. Something pretty useful came from his testimony too. He said that DeeDee had been strong enough to carry some of the heavy furniture during their move, which was an indicator that she was strong enough to move a body. But the defense had tried arguing that there was no way that she could have moved Abraham's body, so now these two details weren't adding up. Now, even though Shar wasn't involved with the murder or covering up the body, DeeDee was doing plenty of things behind Shar's back that linked him to the entire scheme, whether he realized it or not. See, Shar was listed as some of the account holders that DeeDee transferred some of Abraham's money into. Another person who testified was the lead detective who interrogated DeeDee, and hearing what he had to say honestly had my jaw on the floor. Apparently, after one of those interrogations with DeeDee, she fully came on to him and was basically trying to use sex to get out of the situation that she was in. To quote the detective, she actually came toward me and said that I wasn't going to get angry, that I was going to have sex with her. Which, can you imagine? I mean, the balls on this woman. Interestingly enough, the defense chose not to call any witnesses, and I don't know if that was strategic or if they literally couldn't find a single person willing to speak up on DeeDee's behalf. But DeeDee also had the opportunity to testify, but she chose not to, which, given her history of not being able to keep her mouth shut and telling countless different stories, I think it was a good idea. So on December 10th, 2012, after only 3 hours and 16 minutes of deliberation, the jury found DeeDee guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder. All of her lies and stories were for nothing. She shot Abraham in the chest, killed him, then buried him under those concrete slabs. The judge sentenced DeeDee to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And what he had to say to her before leaving the court was pretty much what I think everybody had been wanting to say for a very long time. He called her cruel, manipulative, and he even went so far as to say that she was probably the most manipulative person that the court had ever seen. He also said that while looking into her eyes, that she only saw Abraham as her prey and her victim, and that money was the root of all evil, which I don't think that anybody could have summarized it better. Abraham's family was extremely happy with the outcome. They felt like he was finally getting the justice that he deserved, and his mother also said that she had forgiven DeeDee with some help from God, which I wish I could say that that was the end of it and DeeDee was like done with all these shenanigans, but of course she refused to just take the loss. And in 2019, she wrote a letter to the court apologizing, which seems shocking for everything that we know and everything that we've heard about DeeDee. Not that she was really taking accountability.
I'm truly sorry to the prosecutor, Abraham's mom, and the others I have hurt for not being truthful. I regret my actions. But in the next breath, DeeDee Moore denies being the killer and instead points the finger at key witness Greg Smith.
To top it all off, she claimed that she had a witness who could corroborate her story and prove that she wasn't the murderer, but that unfortunately her defense attorney had refused to let them take the stand. So it's just like she never stopped with the lies. Pretty recently, too, in the summer of 2023, DeeDee was back in court demanding a new trial. She once again pinned the guilty verdict on anybody that she could think of besides herself, mainly claiming that her lawyer was complete garbage.
He put no defense on. Absolutely none. He was horrible. There's 3 DNAs on that carpet. No one understood after that trial. There was 3 DNAs on that carpet. No one in that courtroom understood that.
Again, she said she had a witness who could prove that she was innocent, but apparently this witness had recently passed away. And get this, she said that in 2018, that Greg was the murderer. But now she was back to saying that it was a drug dealer, and this alleged dealer's crimes was covered up by corrupt law enforcement officers. I mean, get a grip, lady.
They're being paid under the table because cocaine dealers can afford a lot.
As far as I can tell, the official ruling on whether or not DeeDee would be getting a new trial was supposed to be decided sometime late last year, but I couldn't find any updates on it. I don't know if maybe things keep getting pushed back or what. I would think that it would be huge headline news, but like I said, it's pretty much crickets as far as updates go. I, for one, hope that she will not get a chance to defend herself for a second time when it's so clear, at least to me, that she is and always has been guilty. This whole case is just so wild to me. I think it's especially crazy because it takes something we all want so badly, like winning the lottery, and it puts the most unfortunate, unlikely twist imaginable on it. And it's just so sad. This man who won the lottery, who grew up in like poverty conditions and then wanted to give back to everybody and anybody who he met, irresponsible or not, it's like then somebody saw him as a target and preyed on him. It's horrible. And it kind of just makes you think, if you ever win the lottery, don't tell a single soul, right? Thank you so much for hearing Abraham's story today and allowing his memory to continue on as a selfless, giving person. And let me know what you think about DeeDee. Do you think anybody else could have been involved? Do you think that she is being framed? Unlikely. Again, eye rolling so hard I can see my brain. But let me know what you guys think. Thanks for tuning in, and if you don't want to miss more deep dives like this, make sure to hit subscribe. It's totally free. That way you will be following the channel and you won't miss any of these episodes in the future. All right, thanks again, guys, and until the next one, stay safe.